He heard the house before he saw it, which was not on newcomers after 3 days away. The particular quality of a space that had been inhabited by one person instead of two, quieter than it should have been but not empty, the sound of a life being lived carefully. Daxton Mercer had been in Boston for 72 hours of meetings that had required his full attention and had received it, and he was returning to a house that had been his for 9 years and had been theirs for 8 months. And the difference between those two durations was something he had not yet fully resolved. He set his keys on the table by the door in the way he always did, and he heard the kitchen, and he walked toward it, and Elise was at the counter with her back to him.
You're early.
The last session ran short.
There's food if you want it.
Thank you.
This was what they were, in the kitchen at 7 in the evening after 3 days apart, polite and functional, and careful with each other in the way that was not inconsiderate, but that was not yet the other thing either. 8 months had produced this, which was more than nothing and less than what he had expected when he had made the decision that preceded the 8 months. And he was aware of the gap between those 2 points without knowing yet how to close it. She was wearing a dark pullover with sleeves that came to her wrists, which was not unusual for late November, and he noticed it with the part of his attention that noticed things and filed them, and did not always surface them immediately, and he went to the refrigerator for water and she moved to the upper cabinet for something, and her arm went up, and the sleeve slid back 2 inches. He had poured the water. He set the glass on the counter. He did not move. She was reaching for something on the second shelf, and her left sleeve had pulled back enough to show the inside of her forearm, and what it showed was a bruise that was 3 days old by the color of it, dark at the edges and yellowing at the center, the size and shape of something that was not an accident. She got whatever she had reached for and brought her arm down, and the sleeve came back, and she turned to set the thing on the counter and found him standing very still, looking at her arm, and the expression on her face when she found him looking was not the expression of a person who had not expected this moment, but the expression of a person who had expected it and had been hoping it would not come yet.
Who did that?
It is nothing.
He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, and he did not grab her arm, did not touch her at all except to place his hand very lightly on her wrist, palm up, not holding, just there, and he looked at her arm. She did not pull away.
Elise.
It happened when I was moving something in the storage room. I caught it on the shelf.
He looked at the bruise. He looked at her. She looked back at him and did not say anything further, and in the silence between them, he could see that she knew he did not believe her, and she could see that he knew she was lying, and neither of them said anything about those 2 facts directly, because they were still at the stage of their marriage where the direct thing required a courage that had not yet finished building. He took his hand away.
All right.
He picked up the glass of water and went to the doorway of the kitchen and stopped without turning around.
Did anyone come to the house while I was away?
She was quiet for a moment, the specific quality of a pause in which a person is selecting from several possible responses rather than simply finding words for the true one.
Your mother came by on Wednesday to check on the house.
How long did she stay?
An hour or so.
All right.
And he went down the hall to his office and closed the door. And the sound of the door closing was not loud either, and that was the worst of it, that none of it was loud, that the thing between them was happening in complete quiet. He sat at his desk and did not turn on the light, and did not open his laptop and did not call anyone. The office was dark, and the city beyond the window was doing what November cities did, which was continue regardless of what was happening in any particular room within them, and he sat in his chair and thought about the bruise, which was 3 days old and therefore had been there since Wednesday, which was the day his mother had visited the house, and he thought about an hour or so and moving something in the storage room and the way Elise's face had looked when she found him looking at her arm. He thought about 8 months of careful politeness and the specific texture of a life shared with someone who had decided, for reasons he had not yet been permitted to understand, to take up as little space as possible within it. He thought about the bruise and about the distance between them and about how long a thing could exist in a space before it became the defining quality of the space, and he thought, not much longer. In the bedroom above him, Elise was sitting on the edge of their bed with her sleeve pulled down to her wrist and her hands in her lap. She was thinking about the moment he had placed his hand on her wrist, which had been the gentlest thing she had experienced from him in 8 months of marriage. And that fact, the gentleness of it, was the thing she was sitting with. She had expected anger. She had expected the specific kind of anger that men in his position deployed when something in their domain had been disturbed. The directed and purposeful anger of a person whose control had been violated. She had not expected his hand on her wrist, offering rather than taking. She had not expected the quiet. She sat in the dark of their bedroom and thought about her father, who had been quiet in the weeks before he chose the easier thing, and she thought about how she had promised herself she would not wait for the quiet to tell her what it meant, and she was waiting again. She was doing it again, and she did not know what else to do. Morning came the way mornings came in late November in that house, grey and quiet, and with the particular quality of a day that had not yet decided what it wanted to be. Elise was awake before 6, which was not unusual for her, and she lay in the bed that was large enough that she was not aware of another person in it when the other person was also still, and Daxton was still in the way that suggested he had not slept the way sleep was supposed to work, which was to say he was present and not resting. She got up before he did and went to the kitchen and made coffee and stood at the window while the coffee brewed and looked at the garden, which was dormant in the way November gardens were dormant, everything reduced to its essential structure, and she thought, I need to decide something. She had been thinking this since the previous evening. She had not yet decided what she needed to decide. Daxton came downstairs at 7, dressed, which meant he had been awake long enough to have made decisions about the day that required preparation. He poured coffee.
Good morning.
Good morning.
They were very good at good morning. It was one of the things they had established early, the morning greeting, the small acknowledgements that a household required to function. She thought, sometimes, that the household functioned very well, and that this was both an achievement and an indictment. He went to his office and she heard him on the phone at 7:30, which was early but not unusual. She went about the morning with the efficiency she had developed over 8 months, the efficiency of a person who had organized her space around the negative image of another person's habits rather than around the positive image of a shared life, and she was aware of this as she moved through it, the specific limitation of it. At 9 she heard him end the call. She heard him at his desk for another 20 minutes, and then she heard him in the corridor, and then he appeared in the kitchen doorway and said,
I need to ask you something.
All right.
She turned to face him because she had decided some time in the previous hour that facing things directly was the practice she needed to develop, and she was going to practice it now.
Did my mother come to the house alone?
Yes.
And you were alone with her for an hour?
Approximately.
Was the conversation you had with her about household arrangements?
Partly.
What was the other part?
She looked at him, and the look she gave him was the look of a person who was deciding, in real time, which version of the truth to offer, and she could see him see her deciding, and the fact that he could see it was itself information, because it meant he was paying attention with more than the part of him that functioned in professional situations.
She expressed some opinions about my place in this house.
What opinions?
That it might not be a permanent one.
In what sense?
In the sense that she thought I might reconsider my commitment to the arrangement.
He was quiet for a moment. Not the office quiet, the processing quiet she had come to recognize as his mode of receiving information that required integration.
She suggested you leave.
She suggested I consider it.
And the bruise?
The bruise was a physical expression of the conversation.
She had not intended to say it that precisely, but there it was, and it was accurate, and she watched him receive it, and she watched his face, and it was not the face she had feared. It was not the face of a man calculating how to handle a complication. It was the face of a man who had heard something that produced in him something that was not a calculation. He was quiet for longer than she expected.
I see.
It was not a severe injury.
That is not the relevant thing.
I know.
The relevant thing is that she put her hand on you.
Yes.
And you did not tell me.
No.
Why not?
And here it was, the question she had been not asking herself since Wednesday, the question she had been circling in the bed and at the window and in the kitchen with the coffee, while the garden showed its essential structure outside.
I was not certain what you would do about it.
What did you think I would do?
I did not know. That was the part I was not certain about.
He looked at her with something she could not name, which was not anger and not disappointment, and was something more interior than either, something that had to do with a recognition he was making about himself rather than about her.
You were not certain I would take your side.
I was not certain of the order of your priorities.
That is a careful way of saying the same thing.
Yes.
All right.
He went to the coffee and refilled his cup and stood at the counter with his back to her for a moment. And she watched his back, which was the back of a man who was holding something and had not yet decided what to do with it. Then he turned around and said,
I'm going to see her this afternoon.
You do not need to do that for me.
I know I do not need to. I am doing it because it is what I should do, and I should have done it months ago.
Months ago?
I have known since March that she was making things difficult for you. I was handling it in my way, which turned out not to be handling it at all.
You knew from March?
Yes.
And you said nothing?
Yes.
Then we have both been keeping things from each other.
Yes.
That is a place to start from.
It is not an ideal one.
No, but it is the honest one.
He left at noon. She did not ask him what he was going to say, not because she was not curious, but because she had decided that what he was going to say was his decision to make, in the same way that what she was going to say to him last night had been her decision, and she was trying to give him the same space she had wanted for herself. She sat in the house and waited, not anxiously, but with the specific quality of waiting that was not about the outcome, but about the time in which two people were moving toward something that could not be moved toward simultaneously from the same room. She thought about March, about what March had looked like from her side of it, and she thought about the dinners she had attended and the events she had managed, and the specific texture of Mara Mercer's presence at each of them, which had been the presence of a woman who understood social occasions as territory, and who had understood very clearly from the first occasion that Elise was in hers. She had read it correctly. She had simply not known that Daxton had read it too. Mara Mercer's house was 30 minutes from theirs, in the older part of the city where the streets were narrower and the buildings had the specific quality of things that had been there long enough to have stopped proving anything about themselves. Daxton had grown up in this house in the way that children grew up in houses that were also institutions, understanding early that the house represented something beyond its walls, and that the behavior appropriate within them was calibrated accordingly. He parked in the drive and went to the front door and let himself in with the key he had carried since he was 19, and the house greeted him with its familiar smell of old wood and his mother's particular taste in flowers, which ran to white and to arrangements that lasted longer than they needed to, and which she replaced before anyone could see them decline. His mother was in the sitting room with tea, which meant she had been expecting him. He sat in the chair across from her rather than on the sofa, which was a small choice but one she would register, and he looked at her and she looked at him. And the quality of the silence between them was the silence of two people who had known each other long enough to know what the other's silences meant.
I thought you might come.
Did you?
You have your father's expression when you're about to say something you've been working up to.
Tell me about Wednesday.
She set her tea on the table beside her and folded her hands in her lap, which was the posture she assumed when she was prepared to be reasonable, which was not the same as being in agreement.
I went to see Elise while you were away. I thought it was a good opportunity to have a direct conversation without you in the middle of it.
You thought I was in the middle.
You are always in the middle when it comes to her, because you have decided she is more important than your perspective on this matter.
Tell me what you said to her.
Mara looked at him with the specific quality of patience that was not patience at all, but the performance of it, the thing she did when she had decided to give him the version she wanted him to have.
I told her that this family has expectations about what a marriage in this family means. I told her that those expectations have not been met in the 8 months she has been in your house, and that I had concerns about whether she was the right person for what you require in a partner.
And the physical part of the conversation.
She said nothing for a moment.
She has a bruise on her forearm, Mara. 3 days old.
His mother looked at the window.
Look at me.
She did.
What happened?
I made a point.
By putting your hand on my wife.
I made a point.
And said it again because she was the kind of person who believed that the second saying of something established it more firmly than the first. He looked at his mother and thought about the woman who had raised him, who had been raised herself in a family where everything was a negotiation, and where love was not present but was expressed through the language of authority rather than the language of affection, and he thought about how much of what she did came from that history, rather than from any desire to harm, and he thought about how that understanding, which was true and which he had carried for years, did not change what had happened on Wednesday and did not change what he needed to say.
You put your hand on Elise.
I communicated a point that needed to be communicated.
You put your hand on my wife.
He said it the same way the second time he said it, not louder or softer, just the same, and she heard the repetition and understood what the repetition meant, which was that he was not going to accept her language for the thing that had happened.
Daxton.
I am going to say something to you, and I need you to hear it rather than prepare your response while I am saying it.
She was silent.
I understand your concerns about Elise. I have understood them since you first expressed them. I have thought about them, and I have not dismissed them, and I have also not agreed with them, and I should have told you that directly in March when I first understood what you were doing at the events. I did not. That was a mistake.
She looked at him.
But what happened on Wednesday is not a matter of differing perspectives on Elise's suitability. You put your hand on her and you told her to leave. That is not a thing I am going to discuss with you as a matter of opinion.
You would choose her.
I married her. I chose her when I married her. The question you are asking me to answer is whether I will continue to choose her, and the answer is yes, I will, because she is my wife and what happens to her is not separate from what happens to me, and I need you to understand that.
His mother looked at him with an expression he had not seen from her in a long time, which was not quite hurt and was not quite surprise, but was the expression of a person for whom a calculation had returned an unexpected result. She had calculated, all these months, that his deference to her on the question of Elise was evidence that the deference could expand to cover the question itself, and she was understanding now that the deference had been about form and not about substance, and the substance had always been different from what she had believed.
She does not know what this family is.
She knows enough. She has been learning the rest.
You cannot make her into what this family requires simply by deciding she is it.
I am not making her into anything. I am telling you what I decided when I married her and what I am still deciding now.
He stood.
And me.
Whatever relationship you want with us, that is available to you. That is the choice you are making now, not the one about Elise.
He drove home. The drive was 30 minutes, and he spent it thinking not about his mother, who he had said what needed to be said to, but about Elise, who was in their house having spent the last 3 hours not knowing how this had gone. He thought about the look on her face in the kitchen the previous evening, not the look when he saw the bruise, but the look when he had placed his hand on her wrist, the specific quality of surprise that was not about the touch but about the gentleness of it. And he thought, she did not expect gentleness from me. He thought about that for the remaining 20 minutes and arrived at the house with a clarity he had not left with, which was that the thing they had been building for 8 months, the functional and careful thing, was not the same as what they could have, and the difference was not a matter of circumstance, but of choice. And the choice was available to both of them, and had been available since the beginning, and they had not made it yet. She was in the sitting room when he came in, which was not where she usually was at this hour, and he understood from the specific way she was sitting, which was upright and alert rather than settled, that she had been waiting in the active sense rather than the passive one. He sat down not across from her but on the other end of the sofa, which was close enough to be present and far enough to not be presuming, and she looked at him with the question in her eyes that she was not quite asking.
I told her that what she did was not acceptable and that it would not happen again.
What did she say?
Several things. I told her what I needed to tell her.
Which was?
That I chose you when I married you, and that I am still choosing you, and that the question of your place in this house is not a question that is open for her opinion.
She looked at him for a long moment and then she said,
You did not have to do that.
Yes, I did. I should have done it months ago, and I did not, and I am sorry for that.
You are apologizing.
Yes.
To me?
Yes. Is that surprising?
A little.
I am aware that I have not given you many reasons to expect it.
She looked at him, and what she was doing was not deciding whether to believe him. It was deciding whether to let herself believe him, and the difference between those two things was the whole of it. And he could see her deciding, and he waited. She let herself believe him. She did it slowly, which was the only way she knew how to do it. Not as a gesture or a statement, but as an internal shift that she allowed herself to make deliberately rather than reflexively, the way you allowed a door to open that you had been holding closed.
Tell me what she said when you told her those things.
She said I was choosing you over her.
And you said,
I said I had already chosen you. I said the question was what kind of relationship she wanted with us, and that the answer to that was her decision.
She held this for a moment.
she will not forgive you for it quickly.
Possibly not.
She will blame me.
Possibly. That will change or it will not. What will not change is what I said to her.
She looked at him, at this man she had spent 8 months being careful around, and she said,
You sound very certain of something you have not been certain of before.
I have been certain of it since I chose to marry you. I have not been certain of how to express it. Those are different things.
Yes, they are. I need to tell you something I should have told you when it happened.
All right?
When your mother came on Wednesday, she did not come to check on the house. She came to tell me that I had been given adequate time to understand whether this marriage was something I was suited for, and that she had observed that I was not suited for it, and that the most gracious thing I could do was to remove myself before the incompatibility became too difficult to address quietly.
She said this in the same level voice she used for most things, and she watched his face as she said it, and his face did what it had been doing since the previous evening, which was something in the direction of a man understanding the dimensions of a thing he had underestimated.
And when I did not respond to that as she had expected, she took my arm and held it and repeated the point, and the holding was what left the bruise.
He was quiet for a moment.
You should have told me immediately.
I know that now. At the time, I thought, if I tell him, he will have to choose between responding to this and maintaining the peace with his mother, and I did not know which one he would choose, and I preferred not to know.
Why?
Because not knowing was better than the answer I was afraid of.
Which was that I would choose the peace.
Which was that you would choose the easier thing, the thing that maintained the current arrangement at the cost of me.
Like your father.
She looked at him sharply, and he said,
You told me about your father, in the 2nd month, when we were talking about what we each expected from this. You said your father had been quiet for a long time before he made the choice he made.
I did not think you had retained that.
I retained all of it. I simply did not know how to use it, which is a different kind of failure.
The room was quiet for a moment. The sitting room where she had not spent much time because it was a room that was his in the way that many rooms in the house were his, rooms that bore the weight of 9 years of his solitary occupancy, and that she had been careful not to rearrange. She looked at the room now and thought about how much of her 8 months in this house had been organized around the negative space of him, the shape of his absence, and the anticipation of his presence, and she thought, that is not a marriage, that is a proximity, and I have been building a proximity because I was afraid to build the other thing.
I would like to tell you something else.
Tell me.
I have been in this house for 8 months and I have not made it mine. I have been living in it like a guest who has stayed past the polite duration and is not sure of the rules anymore.
I know.
You know,
I have been aware of it since about month 2. I did not know how to address it without it seeming like I was asking you to perform a comfort you did not feel.
you could have asked me what I needed.
Yes, I could have.
We are both very good at not asking.
Yes,
That has to change.
yes.
I mean that as a mutual thing, not a correction directed at either of us specifically.
I understand it that way.
Why did you marry me?
He looked at her.
Not the practical answer, not the arrangement, the reason behind the arrangement.
He was quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that was not evasion but construction. A man putting words around something he had known the shape of, but had not expressed.
Because when I met you, I was very practiced at knowing what was useful and very poor at knowing what was real, and you were one of the first people I had encountered in a long time who said what she actually meant rather than what was expected of her, and I thought I could learn something from being around that.
You married me to learn something from me.
I married you because I wanted to be around someone who was not performing for me, which is different from the practical reason but is also not entirely separate from it.
That is an unusual admission.
I have been making unusual admissions since yesterday evening. I appear to be in a phase of it.
Something in her chest released at that, at the dry quality of it, which she had not heard from him before in this context, and she thought, he has a sense of humor that he does not allow out often, and this is what it looks like when he allows it, and I did not know that about him, and I have been in this house for 8 months.
I married you because you looked at me in the interview for this arrangement as if you were seeing me rather than the list of my attributes, and no one in that process had done that.
I was seeing you.
I know. That is why I agreed.
They sat with this, on the sofa with the distance of half a cushion between them, and the room was quieter than it had been, and the quiet was a different quality of quiet, not the managed quiet of careful people, but the quiet of two people who had said enough that the remaining quiet was comfortable.
I want to ask you something, and I want the real answer, not the correct one.
Ask it.
Do you want this to be something different from what it has been?
He looked at her.
Yes.
What does different look like to you?
It looks like you making that room on the second floor into whatever it should be instead of leaving it empty in case I wanted it for something. It looks like you asking me for things when you need things. It looks like me telling you when something is relevant to you instead of managing it myself.
Those are specific things.
I have been thinking about them for some time.
Since March.
Before March. Since month 3, when I understood that the house was very quiet and the quiet was not comfortable.
I thought you preferred the quiet.
I prefer a quiet that is a choice rather than a condition.
That is a distinction I understand.
I thought you might.
Then I will tell you what I want.
Tell me.
I want to stop being a guest in this house. I want to stop measuring whether I am taking up too much space and start deciding what the right amount of space is. And I want to be able to say to you directly when something is wrong without calculating whether the answer will be the one I cannot survive.
Can you trust that I have said what I said about the choosing?
I am starting to.
Starting to.
I am not good at trusting quickly. I should have told you that before. It is not about you specifically. It is about the history of the evidence, and the evidence is starting to change.
Then I will keep providing evidence.
I would appreciate that.
She reached out and put her hand on the back of his hand, which was on the sofa between them, and did not hold it, just placed her hand there, the way he had placed his hand on her wrist in the kitchen the night before, and he looked at her hand and then at her, and said nothing, which was the right thing to say, and she thought, we have both lost 8 months to carefulness, and we will not get them back, but we will not lose the next 8 months to the same thing. 3 days after the sitting room, she moved the furniture in the second-floor room. Not all of it, and not dramatically, but enough to make it true. She brought in the lamp she had been keeping in the closet, the one she had taken from her apartment when she moved into his house and had not unpacked because she had not known where it belonged, and she put it in the corner of the room that got the afternoon light. And she moved the desk that had been against the wall to face the window, and she found the books she had also been keeping in the closet, in boxes she had not opened, and she arranged them on the shelves in the order she preferred, which was not alphabetical and was not by subject but was by what felt right, the order that made sense to her specifically. She stood back and looked at the room when she was done, and it was not finished. It was a beginning, but it was hers, and the feeling of that was simple and enormous, and she stood in it for a minute before she went back downstairs. Daxton was in the kitchen when she came down, which was where he had been spending more of his time in the last 3 days, and she had noticed this but had not commented on it, had simply accepted it as a recalibration of how the household moved, the way you accepted weather patterns without announcing that you had noticed them. He was making something she could not identify from the doorway, and she said,
What is that?
I was attempting a soup.
You cook.
I cook at the level of a person who has had to feed himself reliably for 20 years and has developed a small number of things he can make without thinking.
Is soup in the small number?
It is in the extended number. I am testing its inclusion.
She sat at the table, which was the action of a person who intended to stay in the kitchen rather than pass through it. And this too was new, the sitting rather than the passing through, and he registered it with the same quality he had been bringing to things since the sitting room, which was without making it more significant than it was, while also not pretending it was nothing.
The room is started.
The one upstairs.
Yes.
Good.
I brought the lamp in.
The one from your apartment.
You knew I had a lamp from my apartment.
It was in the closet in a box labeled kitchen, which seemed like the wrong box for a lamp.
You looked at my boxes.
I was looking for something I had misplaced and I saw the boxes. The labels were not well organized.
I was moving in a hurry.
I know.
He said it in the way that suggested he knew more specifically than that, and she looked at him and thought, there is more of this to learn. There are 8 months of things he noticed and did not say, and that is something I am looking forward to rather than afraid of, and that is new. Mara called on the 4th day. Elise was in the upstairs room when the call came through the house system, and she heard Daxton's voice in his office below, brief and level, and she did not ask him about it afterward, and he came to find her in the upstairs room at lunchtime and said,
My mother called.
I heard.
She is not warm about this yet.
I did not expect her to be.
She will take time.
Yes,
Are you all right with that?
She looked at him and said,
I am more all right with the time than I was with what came before the time. A difficult relationship that is honest is better than a careful one that is not.
She has not called you.
No,
She will, on her schedule, not on ours.
I know. I'm not holding my breath.
Good.
He said it simply, without elaboration, and she understood from the simplicity of it that there was nothing further he needed to say about Mara right now, that the question of his mother was its own ongoing thing, that they were now in together rather than separately, and that the being in it together was the change that mattered rather than the resolution of it, which was still coming. On the evening of the 5th day, she was in the kitchen making tea, and he came home from an afternoon of meetings and set his things down in the corridor in the way he set his things down when the day had been long, and she heard it and put the kettle on for 2 instead of 1, which was the kind of adjustment she had been making without fanfare and without announcement, the quiet recalibration of a household towards something more genuine than it had been. He came into the kitchen and looked at the 2 cups and said,
Thank you.
It is tea.
Yes,
You do not need to thank me for tea.
I know. I am doing it anyway.
and she heard in the repetition of her own words back to her, the words she had said to him in the kitchen the first morning, I know, I am doing it anyway, that he had been listening and had kept what he heard, and she thought, this is what it looks like when someone pays attention. Mare, and I did not have a name for it for 8 months because I did not expect to see it.
Can I ask you something?
Yes,
When I told you that I was afraid you would choose the easier thing, that I was afraid of finding out,
yes,
were you ever afraid of a version of that? Of finding out that I had agreed to this for reasons that were not about you?
He was quiet for a moment in the honest way rather than the evasive way.
in the 4th month, when you came back from an event my mother had organized, and I could see from the specific quality of how you held yourself that something had happened, and you did not tell me what it was, I thought, she is protecting something from me. And I was afraid the thing she was protecting was the knowledge that she did not want to be here.
I was protecting the knowledge that your mother had told me that I was decorative and forgettable and that I should not mistake your attention for attachment.
She said that to you.
In October,
You told me you had enjoyed the evening.
I had made a decision not to test the question.
Because
Because in the 4th month I already knew enough to know that if the answer was what I feared, I would lose something that was worth more to me than I had expected to find in this.
He held this for a moment.
tell me what it was worth.
The possibility of you. The version of you I could see when you were not managing anything, when you were just thinking about something and you forgot to be careful. I thought, that person exists and I would like to know him, and I could not know him if I tested the question and the answer was wrong.
You stayed because of a version of me you had only seen in glimpses.
Yes,
That is a considerable risk.
I am aware.
You are a braver person than I gave you credit for.
I was not brave. I was invested, and the investment made walking away feel expensive.
That is a very unsentimental way to describe a feeling.
I am working on being less unsentimental. It is a project.
I will help if you want.
I know you will.
They stood in the kitchen with the tea and the November dark outside the windows, and the kettle's warmth in the air, and the house was quiet around them. And it was the best quiet it had been since she had moved into it, the quiet of something that had been reduced to its essential structure and found to be sound. A month after the sitting room, Mara called Elise directly. The call was short and not warm, but it was a call which was what Daxton had said would come eventually on her schedule, and Elise received it, standing in the upstairs room, which was hers now in a way that had accumulated gradually, the lamp and the books and the desk and a plant she had bought because the window was good for it, and she was civil, and she was measured, and she did not try to make the call into more than it was, and when it ended she stood for a moment in the room that was hers, and looked at the afternoon light on the lamp she had unpacked from the wrong box, and she thought, the evidence is changing. She went downstairs and found Daxton in the kitchen, where he had been more often than not in the last month, and she said,
Your mother called.
He looked up from what he was reading.
It was brief.
How did it go?
It was a beginning.
That is enough.
Yes, for now.
She sat down at the table across from him and picked up her own reading, and they were quiet together in the kitchen of a house that was, slowly and without ceremony, becoming theirs, and the difference between that and what it had been was considerable, and was the result of a bruise and a question and a conversation on a sofa and a lamp unpacked from the wrong box, which was not how she would have planned it, and was exactly how it had needed to happen.